And I think that's something that hockey misses out on. There's not the assumption that queer people will be present as a whole. There's this cis-allo heteronormativity, speaking as an ace person, around the culture. It's like, I'm a cis female, you assume I'm watching hockey because I find players hot. No, I'm asexual. That's literally nothing to do with it. I'm Rachel. I'm a PhD student at the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow, and I'm a hockey fan.
I love that. Lawrence Chaney's from there, I believe. Do you follow? Yeah.
He is.
Big Drag Race fan here. How did Rachel get into hockey?
So, slightly non-traditional route for some people. So growing up, my family are big Nottingham Forest fans in the football. So like, I was tangentially aware of hockey. I knew the Nottingham Panthers existed, but I didn't really pay much attention. They'd occasionally advertise at Forest games. And then about, 6 years ago now, maybe 7, probably more like 6, I started reading the webcomic Check Please. And that taught me the rules of hockey as you go. Thanks, Anne, for that. And I was already in fandom at the time. So I ended up in the Check Please fandom, engaged with people in fanish spaces. And one time one of them said, let's watch the NHL playoffs. So I did, and it was for 2016. I fell in love with the Penguins, and I've not really looked back since then. And I live in Glasgow now rather than England, and I've been trying to go to more Glasgow Clan games pre-pandemic. I went to some Nottingham Panthers games back when I was still living in England, made it to a GB warm-up game. And I started learning to figure skate because hockey. And I gained friends in the fanish spaces when I moved across kind of into hockey fandom, and found kind of quite a queer fanish space there with people I became friends with. And that's one of the ways I interact. And actually, hockey fandom kind of helped me get where I am now, because my undergrad was maths. I did a stats research master's. When asked about my other interests in my PhD interview, I talked about hockey statistics, and then I got the PhD. So I can say that hockey stats slightly helped me do what I'm doing today, even though I'm not researching anything related to sport currently.
And what do you love about hockey?
It's the sport, it's the speed, the atmosphere, the emotion. The sound of skates on ice is deeply, deeply relaxing to me. And just kind of the crowd me experience. I've always been a sports fan. My family are football fans. I've been going to football since like the age of 5. And so just kind of engaging with that and the excitement and the fast-paced nature, and also the statistics, the numbers, the data, being able to see the way it's being tracked, and advanced stats are great. And being able to, but also kind of the relationships for players. I'm a huge Flower fan, for instance, and like kind of something that you can talk to friends about. I once watched an AHL All-Star game with friends on like a video chat at goodness knows what time it was in the UK, because there was one player we really wanted to see. And it's just being able to engage like that, and the community aspect.
Community is wonderful, and it seems like a big part of what people love about the sport, especially queer fans, and building queer community within it, and having those niche sort of bonds and friendships that, are so sometimes tough to find, but they're there. if we want to find them. How
Yeah.
could hockey be better for you as a queer person and also for the queer community?
So we'll take a slightly different tack on this. I play a sport that's completely different. I'm a Quidditch player and referee, and Quidditch is one of the queerest sports out there. And I was talking to some of my teammates and my friends about this at the weekend, and kind of the way Quidditch manages to carve a space is queerness is legitimized and explicit within the rulebook. We specifically allow for gender to be what you define it as. And that specific piece of wording, and it explicitly says also that gender does not have to be binary. And that provides a welcoming niche, and people see that and come into the sport. And that effectively kind of carves a space. It's the assumption that queer people are there and are welcome. And I think that's something that hockey misses out on. There's not the assumption that queer people will be present as a whole. There's this cis-allo heteronormativity, speaking as an ace person.
Yeah.
Around the culture, it's like, I'm a cis female, you assume I'm watching hockey because I find players hot. No, I'm asexual. That's literally nothing to do with it. And people, and the way people effectively get gatekept, even say cis female fans who aren't queer, like there's that gatekeeping there. It's also kind of notions of masculinity and class and gender and race. And it's kind of basically, who do they presume the audience is? Who do they presume a normal person is who is watching and engaging with this sport? And that, I think, is where they slip up. You kind of just go, well, no one's told me they're gay, and so there aren't any gay fans. Whereas like in Quidditch, I have never been on a team where all my teammates have been cis and straight. That doesn't happen in the UK, at least. Like, I'm more like, it's just like kind of the diversity. It's getting slightly better, but as someone who is politically left wing and felt deeply, deeply betrayed by the Penguins, A, choosing to go to the White House, B, posing with a Blue Lives Matter flag on ice, it very much feels like the assumption of who and what you should care about does not include queer people as default, and is more likely to include, say, the military or the police.
And take it a step further with them. I mean, they have a partnership with Chick-fil-A, who is funding most of the anti-trans bills in the United States, allegedly, exactly. and is trying to stop the Equality Act in America.
Two of my friends went to a Pride game in the AHL, and they saw a Chick-fil-A ad at a Pride game. It was not the Penguins org.
It's at every game. It's every game they play. If they have a partnership, it doesn't matter if it's Pride night. Most of the teams who have partnerships also have, if you score so many goals, you get a sandwich from Chick-fil-A, and it's even on Pride nights.
Yeah, it's just kind of like very much tokenism, because the other aspect is I'm autistic. I have many opinions about the organizations that NHL teams have chosen to partner with for autism nights, but actually it can be similar in some ways, that it's perceived as there is a figurehead of who they think it is. So for an autism night, it's a little white boy. A little white boy who probably can't speak. And that's who they expect this to be representing. And with a lot of queer stuff, there's kind of the same tokenism. Like, it's getting groups to work on intersectionality, for instance, like Black Girl Hockey Club, for instance, are fantastic. But if you'd ask, say 4 years ago, it's like, if you're doing a game to help that's about the queer community, who would you picture? And it's who gets pictured and who gets included. And even then, still tokenism. But
yeah, it's white cis gay men predominantly.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean? And even within that, there's it's rarely even done.
Yeah,
Like I don't get in the doors, and I'm like the epitome of privilege within the queer community.
yeah. And it's interesting to see the contrasts between the NHL and kind of internationally, because do you know much about what happened with the EIHL and Pride Weekend?
I know that Zach Sullivan was treated exceptionally well.
He was. And basically, I was actually talking to my friends about this morning, actually, to a different group of friends. A few years ago, someone made a comment about, made a homophobic comment, and as a result, fans went to playoff final weekend with the Hockey is for Everyone banners and the pride flag. This was Glasgow Clan fans. There's more information about it online. But in the last pre-pandemic season, there was the league-wide Pride weekend. And I went to the Clans game, Zach Sullivan's former club. And like we found out about him coming out on our way to the game, and everyone was so positive and so happy for him. And it genuinely felt like a really inclusive atmosphere. A friend of mine works for the Clan, she's ice crew, and like she was really happy about it. And it's like the EIHL is far from perfect. One of the, like, as far as I'm aware, David Sims is still employed by the Sheffield Steelers, and he made a homophobic comment about a kiss cam a few years back. Yeah, he saw his very much as a job. But I do feel like on a smaller scale, the EIHL did a better job than the NHL.
Yeah, and I think, my opinion throughout all the sport, and I want to move on to the next point, but regardless of like these nights are lovely to celebrate, but to me it's like having the parade before winning the cup. They haven't fixed their actual culture within locker rooms. They haven't created safe spaces for queer folks to participate in the sport, and yet they have celebratory nights that really aren't doing anything but getting those pink dollars.
Exactly. Like, I know players from the local university hockey team, and I've talked to them kind of about because they are a mixed gender team, and it's just kind of very much, again, the space still remains deeply cis allo heteronormative, and there's not been this meaningful progress towards that. Like, this year is the first year I've seen an NHL team acknowledge publicly on their Twitter that my sexuality exists. But do I expect them to have done anything else? Not in the slightest.
So,
Like,
with that said, what keeps you in hockey?
the fans, like my friends, and the community. Like, I was on Zoom hangouts with my friends during the pandemic, and these were all people I'd met through hockey. And like just the ability to talk about the sport and engage kind of with the wider fandom. Like, what it's kind of, you carve out queer spaces of your own. Like, they're not going to give it to you, you've got to do it yourself. So like, we know that the inclusion isn't there, but if you've got spaces like where you're respecting people's identities and like actually caring about that in a material sense, and just kind of, in a way, the hockey becomes secondary to a friendship, and it's very much all your idols will disappoint you, that kind of notion. Because
Yeah.
I watched what happened with Penguins fandom when they announced that White House visit, and I strongly considered not supporting the team anymore. In the end, I was like, I'm not contributing financially to them at all. I was like, I'm not committing anything that way. I don't want to do anything that would materially benefit.
And to that point, like you look at Carl Nassib coming out, his jersey has been the top selling jersey, and those queer dollars and those dollars of marginalized folks. They're powerful dollars and could revolutionize the sport. So I think they're missing out, to your point.
Absolutely, because from watching my international friends when Zach Sullivan came out, like they were like, we will happily buy like his jersey. But again, I mean, that is still assuming capitalism and capitalism.
Yeah,
But yeah,
without a doubt. What gives you hope for queer people in the sport of hockey?
it's kind of, there's small incremental changes. It's what gives me hope, just kind of, if people going forward who like can change, and generally just knowledge and awareness, like juniors is far from perfect, but like seeing junior teams, for like seeing younger age groups hold pride nights and be enthusiastic, and people who are actually just people who are willing to learn and to challenge their assumptions and prejudices. And because heteronormativity is one hell of a drug, it's like you've got, I personally think that everybody should critically examine their own sexuality and gender identity at least once in their lifetime, preferably more. Just people kind of learning to do that. Like, again, orgs like Black Girl Hockey Club, seeing people who can actually make inroads to change. And again, change outside the NHL. Like if you have a wider cultural shift happening where they can look and go, actually, no, we are behind. This is something where we need to be making the effort to help.
I love that.
And like, because, I mean, if you look at football and what's happening today with regards to the Allianz Arena, and UEFA saying, no, you can't light it up as a pride flag to protest against Hungarian politics. But the backlash from sports teams across Germany and across Europe who are displaying pride flags on wider organizations saying, no, we stand by the original intent, and kind of wider movements like that, but building flashpoint moments into wider systemic change. Like with Black Lives Matter, not just posting a black square, actually reading something into activism and acknowledging privilege. Just kind of that wider sea change, really.
Yeah, and I think all of that needs to occur, and we all need to question ourselves. Like you said, everyone should question their sexuality. Everyone should question their biases and work to do more than the performative, and ask themselves if things they're doing are performative, and if they are, let's evolve, and let's figure out how we can do better and seek out leaders who can lead the way in doing better.
Yeah, and for what you're saying about examining biases, it's one thing that very much comes across as a neurodivergent person, because if you're neurodivergent, you learn that people don't think the way you do. And a lot of people don't get the chance to learn that. And I think learning and understanding that would probably help some people.
100%. Rachel, I want to thank you so much. Your voice, your words are powerful. And I can't wait for everyone to see, hear, and share in your read and share in your experiences. So thank you so much.
Thank you.